This slide looks the same, but I promise it's different because we can go to the next slide. Okay, so Netflix was actually founded a long time ago, 20 years ago. And they originally shipped DVDs in those little red envelopes that we all remember. And they became very, very good at shipping those DVDs. And that was at a time when you could walk down the street and go to a Hollywood Video or a Blockbuster, and there was a physical store you could walk into and you could physically take the DVDs home with you. And Blockbuster was kind of the king at that point. They had stores everywhere. They were making a ton of money. And Blockbuster had the chance to buy Netflix in 2000, 3 years after they launched, for $50 million and said, no thank you. And so 10 years later, in 2010, Blockbuster declared bankruptcy primarily because Netflix had destroyed their business. So Netflix came to market without stores, so their costs were much lower. And really the way Blockbuster made money was on the late fees, right? So you would check out the DVD, not return it, they would charge you money. That was a big chunk of Blockbuster's revenue, and Netflix just got rid of that. You know, they came in with a pricing model that didn't have any late fees. You just didn't get another video until you sent the one back. So they basically knocked the knees out from under Blockbuster's business model. So that meant Netflix's business model was validated, right? So here's the thing. That was 2010. Netflix had just started streaming, but they were primarily shipping DVDs. So little red envelopes. And actually, it was funny. At Christmas, I was with my wife's parents, and my father-in-law still gets those little envelopes. You know, so there's still a business there. But most of us in this room, you know, are streaming and are used to watching it on a computer or an iPad or whatever. So in a few short years, Netflix entirely shifted the business model, right? So again, they'd been experimenting with streaming starting in 2007, but it really started to take off. And they were streaming other people's content. And then, you know, by 2015, they were responsible for a big chunk of internet traffic. And then in 2013, they released their first original series, House of Cards. And you know, now, a few years later, they're winning all kinds of Emmys. They did 30 original programs last year. They're expecting to double that this year. They're spending $6 billion on content this year. They've become a destination. And it's, you know, it's turned out to be a better business model for them. And so, you know, it's a complete shift from shipping DVDs. So their CEO, Reed Hastings, has this to say: we don't really know where we'll be in another 5 years. And he said this in 2016, about 5 years before, when they were primarily shipping DVDs. We're figuring out every year how to use the internet to make a great consumer experience. Every year is an experiment. So this is really the concept that I want to talk about, is this constant evolution, following the customer, doing experiments, figuring out where the market is going, and then, you know, making sure that you're following along. And this is exactly what Blockbuster didn't do, right? Blockbuster was like, we have stores, we make money off the late fees, we're just going to keep doing that. And Netflix would be in the same position as Blockbuster right now if they had kept shipping DVDs. So they had to change in order to survive, and now, you know, they're doing a great job of it. So if we're going to experiment, the question is, how do we do that? And so really, any business, any entrepreneurs, this is sort of what we talk about, I talk about when I work with entrepreneurs, but everything is an assumption, bless you. So you create your assumptions, and that might look like a business plan or a pitch deck. It might look like a minimum viable product. In Netflix's case, you know, it was actually a working business model that put someone else out of business. But even that was still an experiment. It turns out mailing DVDs wasn't the ultimate answer. It was just that answer at that time. So it's always an assumption. You know, the best way of tackling things is mailing these DVDs. Well, maybe we should do some experiments with streaming and original content and see how that goes. And so you go out into the world and you validate your assumptions, and then you come back and adjust your assumptions based on what you've learned. And this is really, you know, companies that build this into their DNA are the ones that stay current and the ones that win, and the ones who don't, like the Blockbusters of the world, end up getting crushed. And this, this has some significant ramifications, which I'll talk about in a minute. There's a guy named Steve Blank who wrote a book called 4 Steps to the Epiphany. And one of the points he makes that other people have made is that the companies that win are the ones that do this really well. The ones that make the decisions quickly, get into motion, and then learn as they're going. And they treat everything as an assumption, even things that are working, and thus everything becomes an experiment that they can learn from and adjust and evolve based on. And so Facebook calls this move fast and break things. Get something up, figure out how to measure it, watch how people use it, and then adjust. And it's interesting when you look at the evolution of Netflix, pretty much the only thing that's the same is that they provide video entertainment. The way in which they do that, the actual video entertainment that they provide, all of that has changed. But really the core is the vision of providing video entertainment in a format that consumers want. And so the next question is, how do we run these experiments? And this is obviously a deep topic. I'm just going to cover the surface here. But one key to an experiment is time boxing it. So you might measure something for 2 weeks or 3 weeks or 6 months, but you want to set a time limit before you start the experiment. And you want to make a prediction about what's going to happen. So we're going to do this for 2 weeks, and at the end of it, we expect this. And you don't do that to be right. You do that to improve your ability to predict. So you want to make the prediction and then see how close you came, and then understand why you predicted close or not so close, and what were those factors. So that you learn to predict better over time, and you get smarter about your experiments. And then you want to take little bets. If you're in a situation where you're having to bet the entire company on an experiment, you may have waited too long to start experimenting. So it's much better if you can run little bets constantly and then double down on the winners and stop doing the things that don't. And you see companies doing this, like Amazon. Amazon Web Services has become a huge business for them, and it's not about retail. It's an experiment that they had that eventually turned into something, and they kept doubling down on it, and now it's this giant business. And you also see it with Google, with the Google X Labs. Some of their experiments they've carved out into their own companies, and again, they're doubling down on the ones that are working and closing the ones that aren't. And so this is my diagram of awesomeness. And there's 3 pieces to it. The first is the vision. So, famous visionaries like Steve Jobs, or even Netflix has this vision of providing video entertainment. And so, a lot of times people talk about the next piece being execution. And I prefer to think of it in terms of customers. So it's the vision blended with what people actually want. And this is where I see a lot of companies stumble, because the vision is clear, but they don't really understand how customers use the product, and so the experience falls flat and people move on. So again, this is part of what happened with Blockbusters. They didn't stay up with the customers who wanted things to come in the mail or wanted things to stream and did not want to have to go down to the store physically and pay the late fees anymore. And the third piece is this legacy piece. As we become successful, things become ingrained. This is the way we do things at this company. This is the way we've always done them. This is the way we need to keep doing them. And so success is great, and we're all looking for success. But the trick is balancing that with this need to keep evolving and moving forward. And when you get these 3 things right, you end up with awesomeness right in the middle with the gold star. So let's talk about the goal. Actually, let's talk about the book, The Goal, by Eliyahu Goldratt. And it's a book all about assembly lines. Who wants to talk about assembly lines this morning? Anyone? Me? And so there's a bunch of good points in this book, and I'm sure many of you, if you have an MBA, you've probably read this book. If not, there's a bunch of lessons to be learned from assembly lines. One of which is, if you have stages in your assembly line, which is what an assembly line is, And there's slight variances in each of those stages, meaning a little bit of error. Most of the things come out correct from that stage, but there's a few errors. What happens by the end of the chain is those errors have multiplied, and you end up with 1 in 10 defect rates, or something crazy. And so you have to be really careful when constructing and managing an assembly line. And so how does this apply to our businesses? Basically, everything we build is essentially on a foundation of someone else's assembly line. And I'll explain that in a second. But the sands are always shifting underneath us. And so we're forced to evolve whether or not we do it, whether we make a conscious decision to do it. So my point is, you're better off making the conscious decision and embracing the fact that you're going to have to change. And again, I'll walk you through some examples. So everything is changing, products are changing all the time, and the foundation that the products are built on is changing all the time. Markets are changing all the time, and customers' tastes and what's happening is changing all the time. And IP is changing all the time. So, for example, with Netflix, the features that made them successful enough to put Blockbuster out of business are no longer important to the company. Yes, my father-in-law still receives those red envelopes in the mail, but that's not where the bulk of the revenue is coming from. So all that work and all that success doesn't matter in today's version of Netflix. You see some other stuff with IP. For example, data has become really important, and sometimes it's even more important than the actual product. Because again, this isn't about features, and the data survives longer than the individual features do for the product. So let's talk about the product assembly line. So when we think of development, we think of, and I'm going to use this software example here, an app developer example, but this is just as true of physical products. Whatever you're building is actually at the end of an assembly line, and there's other pieces in the chain. So using this example of an app, you have the hardware. So I have an iPhone, right? And that iPhone changes every year. There's a new version of the iPhone. The specs change, the screen changes, the hardware is changing out from underneath my app. There's an operating system that runs on that hardware. So I could also be running a Dell computer or a Mac computer. All of those things have operating systems, and those also are changing all the time. And then there's a web browser or whatever my app is running on top of, and that's changing all the time. And only then do we get to the actual product that I'm building here. And each stage in that assembly line introduces error, and those errors can sneak up on you because today my code's working, tomorrow Apple releases an update and my code stops working. So the sands are shifting underneath us. And this is just as true of physical products. If you look at a company like Tesla, they're taking physical input of materials and components and putting those things together, and those things can change also. The way those things are manufactured can change. And so there's change happening constantly in the product. There's also change constantly happening in the market. So first of all, the culture is changing. Right now, iPhones are incredibly popular and Tesla cars are incredibly popular. And there's reasons for that, and those reasons are under constant change or threat of change. The technology landscape is changing all the time. Pricing is changing all the time. So Blockbuster won with a pricing model of late fees. Netflix came to market with a pricing model that did away with those late fees. Google has famously made a ton of money providing free products because they can monetize the data, and that data actually makes their paid products better. So they can undercut Microsoft on price for Office software, for example. And the competition that you're up against, or any alternatives that people can use instead of your product, are changing all the time. And the same is true of IP and the legal landscape. For example, I was working with an entrepreneur who's raising a fund to do real estate investing in the cannabis industry, which is weird right now because globally, at the UN level, it's illegal. It's a Schedule I narcotic. Nationally, at the US level, the federal level, it's illegal. It's a Schedule I narcotic. But individual states have made it legal, and the Obama administration has looked the other way, and now you've got an administration coming in that is not cannabis friendly. So it's, it remains to be seen how that will play out. But again, that landscape is constantly shifting. Regardless of what this guy is doing with his individual fund, he's building on a foundation that is changing all the time and changing pretty radically on a regular basis. So regardless of what we do, change is coming, and the companies that embrace that and use that to evolve are the ones that are going to win. So I'm just going to run through 4 quick strategies to accomplish this. And so the first strategy is to measure everything, and everyone's familiar with this. We hear about analytics all the time. People are constantly measuring what people do. I like digital examples, but this works for anyone. This is simply a sales funnel. So in this case, this is a conversion. So if I'm running a website, 5% of the people who come to my website may download a white paper. Of those people, 30% come back to the website for more information. Of those people, 2% make a purchase that turns into money at the end of and that's essentially an assembly line, right? So at the end of my assembly line, I end up with dollars. And what breaking this down does is allow me to see where is the leakiest bucket, and then I can target that. So what I would want to see in my conversion funnel is my numbers getting bigger all the time. So that 2% is where I want to target. Why aren't more people who come back to my website purchasing from me? How do I fix that? And I was working with an entrepreneur for the past couple months where they had a long application process on the site, but weren't recording the email address, and were only recording if people filled out the entire application. So they had like an 80% drop-off rate. And so by breaking it into sections, and in the first section capturing the email address, they were able to figure out, build one of these models, and then figure out where the leaky bucket was, and capture the email address right at the beginning, so they could reach out to people and say, "Hey, I noticed you didn't finish your application. Can we help?" Which A, gives you more conversion, and B, gets you into the mind of your customer, so that you can maybe ask some people, even if they don't buy from you, you can understand why, because they'll tell you why they didn't fill out the application. And so that kind of brings us to my second point, which is analytics tell you what. So I can look at the assembly line and see where the leaky bucket is, but my analytics don't tell me why. They don't put me inside the minds of people. So analytics they're a great tool, but they leave me in the position of guessing. And this is where you see people doing things like changing the color of a button from red to blue, and the blue button converts better. Or they change an image, or they change a headline, and they find better conversion rates, but it's a guessing game. And again, if we're doing experiments, we might be doing 2-week, 3-week, 4-week experiments. And if the experiment doesn't go well, we may have lost that time. So it's this constant guessing game where we're trying to read people's minds. So strategy number 2 is actually listen to your customers, go out and talk to them. And there's a great book that came out last year, written by a couple of the guys from Google Ventures, called Sprint. And they introduced this concept of the design sprint. And the subtitle is Solve Big Problems and Test New Ideas in Just 5 days. And the idea is you do this sprint, this very quick sit down with your customers, and you put something in their hands, whether you have an existing product or you need to mock something up, and you get them to tell you what's going through their heads. And really you're doing a couple things. One is this helps you understand very quickly what people think when they look at your product, which the analytics won't tell you. 2, it lets you see if people understand the value of what you're providing. A lot of applications and products, both physical and digital, trip over the fact that people don't know what they're for or why they're supposed to use them. So is your messaging clear? And 3 is, can people get to that value, right? Like, I may think this is the most useful thing in the world, but if I can't get it to work, I'm going to move on to something else. So the genius of this is it's only 5 days. So on day 1, you map out what you want this to do and who you want it to do it for. And then you book 5 slots, book 5 people to talk to on Friday, and 5 backup people. So if one of your people flakes out, you have someone to step in. And so then your deadline is set, you have it scheduled, and it's definitely going to happen. That is the genius here, set a deadline and then things actually occur. And it's short. So you sit down with your team, you sketch out what the interface might look like, or if you're doing a physical product, you might make something out of clay or styrofoam or a 3D printer. You decide which is, you have kind of a bake-off and decide what the best approach is. You prototype it, mock it up. So if it's a physical product, you get to something that you can put in people's hands. It is by no means a finished product. If it's digital, you don't do any programming, you don't do any development, but you might put together a couple screens in PowerPoint that look like something that people can click through. And again, you just want to put something in people's hands on Friday where you can sit there and have them walk you through what's going on in their head and what they're thinking. And this has some pretty amazing consequences. I have seen some amazing results of this. And you don't need the type of scale you do with analytics. With analytics, I need thousands of data points before I really have statistical significance. Here, in 5 one-hour conversations, I know a lot. Like, I can see some patterns pretty quickly. And I was working with an entrepreneur in the fall who I said, he's successful, he's been doing software for 10 years, he has a product that's making millions of dollars. And I asked him when the last time he sat down in front of customers was, and he says, I don't need to, I'm making all this money. And I said, this is a really good idea, you should sit down with customers. And he said, you do it. So I went and did a little bit and saw some things people were tripping over, but I couldn't get him to participate. And then finally, a few weeks later, I got this email from him saying that he had finally sat down with 3 people, and it had totally changed his understanding of how people saw and interacted with the software. Just 3 conversations made him reevaluate the interface, change the order in which, like the product roadmap, the feature set. It really opened his eyes. There's a saying in tech that you got to get out of the building, so you got to go talk to people. So that's strategy 2. Strategy 3 is setting aggressive goals. So there's this concept of 10x goals that Google champions a lot, but any kind of aggressive goal will work. And basically the idea is, if I'm here and I want to get to there, right? I want to get from this year to next year. If I set a 10% growth goal and I hit that, I get 10% growth. If I miss it, maybe I get 5% growth. But if I set a more aggressive goal, like if I say to myself and my team, what would I have to do to 10x my revenue in a year? That forces us to reevaluate everything. So if we sit here for 10 seconds and think about what you would have to do to 10x your revenue this year. Ready? Go. You got to change everything, right? You got to change the product, the team, the marketing, everything you're doing. But if you set that kind of goal and reevaluate and really try to get there and get your team aligned on it, even if you fail, you may fail and only get 2x or 3x times your revenue. So you fail much better if you set more aggressive goals. It's scary because no one likes to change everything, but that's how you can get to, that's how you can force yourself to evolve. And the question that came up as I was preparing this in my head was, what if Blockbuster had done this, right? You see the Netflix threat coming, and you're like, okay, what do we need to do to 10x revenue next year? Regardless of what Netflix is doing, what do we need to do? Maybe we need to ditch the physical stores. Maybe we need to have some other revenue stream besides the late fees, right? And it really forces you to rebuild yourself from the ground up and push yourself beyond what you're comfortable with. And here's my last strategy, and this always seems like the low-hanging fruit to me, which is make it easier for people to buy from you. And this is a really interesting concept. So I have 2 circles here, people who want to buy from you and people who actually buy from you. And the circle on the left is not people who come to your website, it's not people who are interested, it's not people who have downloaded a white paper. It is people showing up who want to buy from you. They have cash in hand, they want to buy what you're selling, and so there is actually a sales funnel there. Not all of those people succeed in buying from you. And so if you can figure out what's happening there and make that part easier, you will raise revenue, right? And that's a way you can evolve. And you're thinking to yourself, wait, it's really easy to buy things, right? So here's a really scary chart. This is the average retention curve for Android apps. So the best apps do better than this, but in general, out of 5,000 apps, what this says is on day 1, 75% of the people stop using the app. And I think we've all done this. We've downloaded something to our phone and then just, like, the sign up is too hard, or we don't understand the features, or it's not as useful as we thought it would be. So here we have this 3/4 of the population who is showing up ready to buy from us is giving up on day one, right? So there's a lot of room for improvement there. So that's the digital side. On the physical side, who in this room has gone to a Starbucks, seen that the line is too long, and walked away, right? And who's done that multiple times in their lives, right? So again, this is me showing up to a Starbucks with money in my hand, ready to buy from them, and I'm unable to buy from them because they can't take my money and hand me a cup of coffee fast enough, right? So, you know, how many millions of dollars is that when multiplied by all the Starbucks across the globe? So, and Starbucks is working on this. So this is a Starbucks I was at in Midtown Manhattan at morning rush hour, 8:45 in the morning in Midtown Manhattan in December, which is a crowded month in Midtown. People are there for the Christmas windows. And so they've done a couple things. You can see them experimenting. So they've got this app that you can order ahead of time and skip the line. But clearly, not enough people are using the app because there's still always a line, right? But the thing that they had done in this particular Starbucks that was working was they had added this woman with a register up ahead of the regular register, and she was kind of front running the line. And what happened is at 8:45 in the morning, and I had already walked past another Starbucks that had a line that I was not willing to wait in, and I came across this one, and I was the third person in line, 2 blocks away. And the difference was this woman standing there. And this is a place that companies can really stand to evolve. Just make it easier for people to buy from you. There's some friction there. And so I encourage companies to look at that. So those are the 4 strategies that I recommend for evolution. Measure everything, listen to customers, set 10x goals, or at least aggressive goals, make buying easier for your customers. And again, the way to experiment is to treat everything like an assumption, go out into the world and validate it, and then bring it back and adjust your assumptions accordingly. So that's it. Thank you. Are there questions?
I just had a question about the Starbucks thing. But what was she doing, like, in the front? She was just taking...
She was taking the orders
before the other guys would take.
Yes, exactly. So the order was already placed ahead of time, and then when you got up to the actual register, your order was already being made, you paid, and then the wait was like 4 minutes for a cup of coffee instead of 10 minutes for a cup of coffee, and the line didn't back up. And it was only at that one Starbucks. I kept looking for it at other Starbucks, and it wasn't there, so hopefully they will learn from that experiment.
Hi, but there's a risk there because if a customer gives his order to the mobile order taker and then he says to heck with this and walks away, then they will have made a cup of coffee that they won't have anybody to sell to.
Yes.
Unless they can resell it to somebody else, which I'm not sure you can always
Right.
do.
Or unless their margin on that cup of coffee is so high that,
Right.
I mean, at Starbucks, you've got some pretty good
Yeah,
margins to work
right.
with.
So there's a risk to all.
Absolutely. And you have to weigh, you know, how much business am I losing every day from people turning around and walking away versus how much do I stand to gain by shortening that line? And yes, that you are correct. There's absolutely a balance there.
Yeah, lines are enticing as well. I mean, it's free advertising.
Yep.
You know, if you have a novel business that people aren't familiar with and there's no line, people assume it's not good. So,
Yeah,
you know,
totally.
lines are valuable marketing.
Yes, and I think there's certain places where lines make sense. I am not convinced that Starbucks is that place at this point in their story arc. But yes, certainly in Florida and on South Beach, we see a lot of lines being used to promote and sell things. That's how we know that things are interesting, and the social proof definitely helps.
Yeah, it's like validating a novel idea. You know, while
Absolutely.
it's still novel,
Yep.
this is how you get new customers.
And you see it with restaurants. Like with restaurants, you do want to go to the crowded restaurant, right? Because that means it's good and it's popular and the food's fresh. And there's certainly, you know, every case varies. And so, again, each business has to think about it for them individually.
I just had an experience in an Apple store, and I guess Apple is currently using this line thing because I had to buy an Apple, I had to buy an iPhone, and I had still to wait in line because there were not so many people in the store actually, but I still had to wait in the line. And there were like 5 people only there, but then I had to wait in this line, then I had to go to another line. I was like, what is going on, guys?
Yeah.
I just need an iPhone, it's like that easy. But still, you know, I think they're using this line as a marketing thing. you know, just to get to know, just to let you know that the
It's
product
popular
is,
and-
yeah,
Yeah.
is valuated, yeah.
Yeah, which is annoying as a consumer when you know what
Exactly.
you want and you can't buy it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a pregnant wife. We've been outfitting the nursery this month. And the difference between Buy Buy Baby and Babies R Us is Buy Buy Baby makes it really easy to buy. It's right there in the name. Babies R Us, it's a fight to buy things from them. You know, so we go to Buy Buy Baby now because it's too hard to buy things at Babies R Us. I don't know why. Any other questions, comments? Feel free to email me or hit me up on Twitter, or I'll be around. So I look forward to hearing from the rest of the speakers and getting to know all of you throughout the morning. Thank you.
Thank you.